You're gonna lay the front out and kind of press it again just to make sure it's flat. Take this edge and press it back in the edge of the lining, both at the seam allowances. Press them open at 3/8 of an inch. And then you're gonna mark 1.5 inches up. So make sure you put some pins there. You wanna be pretty accurate about this, as accurate as you can. 1.5 inches. You're gonna sew across there. Exactly at 1.5 inches. And then you're gonna stop just as you get onto the other side of this, but don't include the lining when you sew at this point. Okay, double check. Make sure you're at 1.5 inches, and then sew straight across. Do that. Okay, so after you've sewn across at 1.5 inches, you're gonna take and just trim off this end. You're also gonna cut that corner at a 45, or even more if you'd like. And then you're only going to want to trim the top of it all the way off. Across the bottom, you're gonna want to leave 3/8 of an inch or 1 seam allowance on this side of the hem. So exactly like that. And repeat for the other side. Again, everything gets trimmed off of this edge or the top edge. And here, 3/8 of an inch. And then you can trim it back. And then also 45 or even a little more. Just to make sure you got a nice crisp corner there. Next step, we're gonna take the lining and pull it down a little bit until the bottom of this edge matches the bottom of this edge. It's gonna bump up a little bit and it'll look like a little pleat right there or a little bump. That's okay for now. We'll take care of that soon, but that's okay for now. So just pull it down, line it up at that seam allowance, and that's where we're gonna stitch straight across. Also grab this as you move on and pin across the bottom. Make sure you line up that seam with that seam. Pin. This will be a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again here, line that seam up with that seam. And somewhere in the middle or the center back, we're going to leave an opening. I always put my pins vertical when I'm stitching that, and then or horizontal, and then I put a couple of vertical pins just to remind myself to stop sewing and leave that space open. That's actually a little narrow. Maybe 6 or 8 inches or so of open space right in there, and then continue all the way to the other side. Okay, so after we have stitched across the bottom hemline, we're gonna pull the coat through the opening. I have some pins in here, so you gotta be kind of careful, really careful. As you pull it out and pull the coat through the opening, reach in and you can poke those corners out. So you have some crisp, clean corners. And you're gonna have some funkiness going on here. I'll show you how to fix that here in just a little bit. But there should be that opening, and that's that space that we left open early on, and then the lining is hooked to that. So we'll address that in just a minute. The next thing we're going to do is reach through the coat and pull our sleeves through. And if you remember right, in a couple of previous steps, we went ahead and pinned them together just so we would know where they went and they didn't get twisted when we were working on this. So as long as that's there, that's fine. So we're going to bring that out. We're going to find out what two sides pinch together based off of where we already pinned. Pull that pin back out. Keep them pinched. Keep them pinched together. Now push the lining down and inside and reposition that pin again. Again, push that lining kind of downside or create like a cuff in the lining. So push that there. Push it down inside of the outer or the main fabric. And then we'll start to pin all the way around. Just like that. So this is pushed down kind of inside like a cuff and pin all the way around. Same thing for the other sleeve. I'm going to pull the other sleeve back through. Find the end where we have pinned it together. Just to keep it from twisting on us. We're going to pinch that together, pull the pin out, and reposition the pin. Lining up those underarm seams. Again, for me, it's easiest to kind of make a cuff with the liner and just kind of turn it up and tuck it down inside. That way you know which edge goes to which edge, and you can kind of just start pinning around. And that's how we're going to stitch it when we take it over to our machine. We'll just put it in the machine and stitch right around that edge. I think the key to this step is pinning it earlier and making sure it doesn't twist. So when you pull it through, you don't have to worry about whether you've got it lined up right or if it's twisted. After we've stitched the sleeves together at the ends, we're going to push them back through the coat and pull them back out. And I'm going to pull them out with the lining showing a little bit. And then I'm going to press that and then let them go back in. And they'll come up at that 1 inch hem mark when they're lined in there properly. So first pull it on out. Do a little press just to get a crisp fold off of that end that you just stitched. And then we'll pull them back through to where the lining matches up back at the arm side. So now you have a crisp, clean finish on the inside with the lining a little bit shorter than the outside. So press both sleeves just like that. Never underestimate the importance of ironing. Now we're going to go back and lay out our hem. And the first thing we're going to do is make sure that corner's all pressed out nice and tight, as crisp as we can get it along the edge. Be real careful. If you stick scissors in there like I did, be real careful. And after you've pressed that, there's going to be a little area that you didn't sew flat. You just need to take a needle and thread, hand stitch, and whip stitch that closed right there, just like that. Try to hide that stitching as much as you can. Whip stitch that closed, that edge. And you'll also have to go back and remember to hand stitch this little opening closed as well. That's where we turned our coat through. So make sure you go back and stitch that closed as well. After you've got the hem done and you've done your whip stitching and you've closed up the back seam, then you can go back, give it another good press along this front edge, and then we're going to top stitch up the front edge, over the lapel, across the front edge of the hood, or if you have the collar, back down to the other side. And then also go back and stitch either a top stitch, or if you'd like, stitch in the ditch right along this edge, so you can make sure that you've got a channel for your drawstring to go. The other thing I like to do is go back and take a hand stitch or a sewing machine if you want to stitch in the ditch right along that edge at the center back to kind of keep that in place, so the back neckline and the back hood lining or collar lining doesn't shift around on you there. Here's a little tip when it comes to top stitching. If you come down to the very end, and instead of terminating and cutting your threads here, back stitch a couple of stitches and then pull it out and then cut your threads there. That way you don't have just some raw edges poking off of the end of your, or raw threads, or cut threads, I guess, poking off at the end. If you come up a little bit right there and cut, you're able to cut really close and you don't have just those cut threads poking off at the end.